And so, getting back to our regular Monday night monetary reform lectures, what I want to do tonight, before we get back to the lost science of money and talk about monetary reform throughout history, I want to talk a little bit more about my personal activist experience and how I plan on leveraging it to get the mainstream media to pay more attention to our monetary reform movement and to our demand of the National Emergency Employment Defense Act, which of course will get me, you, everyone I know, money in the form of universal basic guaranteed income, most likely, also universal health care, universal education. This bill will create livable wages, creating a green new energy infrastructure, getting our nation's roads and bridges and our energy grids up to modern standards. And this will also fully fund political elections. If you're worried about, Russian influence on our democratic process, then the NEAT Act is also for you. No, that's very important to monetary reformers like Greg Coldridge, who I follow very closely. So, and that's just with, the NEAT Act also gets debt relief. So if you have student loan debt, medical debt, housing debt, the NEAT Act helps you with it. So that's why I'm giving this presentation tonight on how to apply grassroots and social media strategies and tactics from Occupy Wall Street towards our monetary reform movement and towards the NEAT Act. And so my objectives for tonight is to help you understand how the grassroots and the social media dynamics of Occupy Wall Street led us to 420 Fight Club and to people's genealogy of money. And I also want you to understand how we plan on using these dynamics in order to make the mainstream media and then eventually Congress pay attention to our demands for monetary reform with the NEAT Act. And ultimately, I want you to have a sense of how you can join in and how you can help with however much or however limited your resources are in order to help 420 Fight Club and monetary reform piece of legislation that exists right now. So, what is an occupation? Let's take it back to 2011 for a second. An occupation, in its simplest word for me, is a scene. It's a spectacle. It's something that grabs everyone else's attention. It grabs the attentions of passerbys as well as the mainstream media. And we're going to talk about how to start one. In 2011, what we did, our occupation was actually a collection of different spaces within one bigger space within Zuccotti Park, which we named Liberty Plaza. So there was the most important part of the park was arguably the social media center, the people's media center. That was sort of like the light that kept the occupation going. From there, it was possible to do our own grassroots media and to solicit donations as well as help and supplies and resources. And of course, back up a little, there was an area for assemblies. Obviously, that was really important. The General Assembly helped give focus to the movement every evening, a place for new people to start to get involved. And of course, that also involved Infotable, which was a really important point of the occupation. At first, that was just sort of connected with the social media area. The press and the social media worked pretty well together. Another very, very important part, quite possibly the stomach of the movement, was the kitchen. And this was a really important part of the movement. This kitchen and the people who worked really hard to collect food, be it from dumpster diving or be it just from organizing donations from different restaurants, from different chefs, from different people throughout the city. This kitchen helped keep people in the park 24/7, and it helped bring the community together, quite frankly. It's hard to start a movement without food. Then there was other really important working groups that made this occupation work. The sanitation committee obviously helped save the occupation on October 15th. They helped get lots of other people from the community in to help clean up the park the night that the police were going to evict it. And of course, we'll talk more later about how the police managed to work around the sanitation committee by sending lots of undesirables from jails directly to the occupation. That was confirmed in the Daily Caller. I got blasted by Sean Hannity for pointing this out on Fox. But we definitely have multiple confirmations of the NYPD sending dangerous drunk people, dangerous sexual predators, dangerous drug dealers of various sorts, dangerous criminals down to the occupation for free food. And this enabled the NYPD and Homeland Security to crack down on us. And this kept the public away because there were so many dangerous people in the park. So then the community reaction and the media weren't able to come defend the park from the police, when they eventually did clear it out on November 17th. So let's say, just hypothetically, we were to start an occupation at Federal Reserve branches, not just here in New York, but at every other Fed branch in the country, and ideally every other central bank location in the entire world. Let's see our Homeland Security, let's see them empty their jails and send dangerous people. Let's see them send criminals and predators down in front of the Federal Reserve. Let's see that drum circle, that noise circle that was down in this side of the park here was the directionally challenged. The west side, the east side of the park. The west side of the park was, a little bit more organized. There was big arguments about east and the west side of the camp, but that drum circle down in the less organized west side of the camp, let's see that come back at Louise Nelson Plaza. Let's see if the bankers can keep making money out of debt with that drum circle blaring up their focus on a daily basis. I think it would be fun, but ideally, we don't need to do what we did. We don't need to start another occupation. The point is that an occupation is a spectacle. It's something that makes people stop in their tracks, stop what they're doing, and want to pay attention to what you're doing. The best way to do that is arguably have a time, but there's other things we can do too. So let's just go back to July 15, 2011 in order to get a sense of how we started our occupation. And this is the image that got me interested and a lot of other people interested in doing this and trying to go down and sleep out on Wall Street. This was the image from Adbusters on July 13, 2011. I was reading Adbusters because I was working in advertising at the time. I was like, what am I doing in advertising? I was looking at Adbusters for ideas about how to apply my analytics and my digital strategy work towards revolutionary goals. I didn't even know about the NEAT Act back then, but that's corporate America is ultimately what got me back into Adbusters. Adbusters is what got me into Occupy. And so since then, I've always tried, when I was creating Occupy Weed Street, the last campaign that we learned a lot from, but I've abandoned it. And this 420 Fight Club image is kind of a homage to this, like the power of that one image. So we got our 420 Fight Club stoner mask here. What this sort of represents to me, and I hope to other people who dig the image, it's a dark image, obviously, but it's supposed to inspire resilience. This is how I feel in the inside. I feel battered. I feel bruised. I know a lot of other people do too. But it doesn't matter what the bankers do to us. It doesn't matter how much pain they put us through. I want them to know that 420 Fight Club isn't going to quit. I want them to know that we enjoy this fight. And so that's why I want more people to wear this image. That's what this image symbolizes to me. So, it takes more than an image to get a movement going. Movements don't happen out of nowhere. Every movement comes from a movement that happened before it, essentially. There's always people who have a bit more experience in these things. And so before Occupy Wall Street, there's a lot of stuff going on. In New York, the closest thing was the Bloombergville budget cuts. These were a bunch of teachers who were protesting a bunch of budget cuts under Mayor Bloomberg. And these people camped out at City Hall. And they didn't have as much media success as Occupy, but they learned a lot. They knew a lot about how to set up a media center, how to get food going. I showed up one day. I hung out with them for one day, but I wasn't a teacher, so I didn't really feel like I fit in or I could join in. But there was other stuff going on too. This is just one occupation. I mean, New Yorkers were paying a lot of attention to what was going on in my home state of Wisconsin in 2011 at that point. And of course, in Spain, there was a big uprising there. And people from Spain actually came to New York before Occupy Wall Street started to teach us how to use live stream and Twitter to promote our action. And I learned through them vicariously, and now I'm trying to teach you to help you understand how to help with this monetary reform movement. And of course, in Egypt, there was Tahrir Square. That was 2010, 2011. That really got a lot of people psyched up. Even before 2010, that time, 2010, 2011, another really important pre-Occupy action that really helped, I guess, shape a lot of the anarchic character of Occupy Wall Street was the Battle of Seattle in 1999, which a lot of people like my generation of anarchists, people a little bit late, mid-30s, we saw that and we were like, wow, that looks like a lot of fun. A lot of us wanted to do that. And I know there were people like David Graeber who were at the Battle of Seattle who got involved with Occupy Wall Street. So we have a wealth of knowledge. We have a tradition of resistance, of effective resistance to draw upon in order to get our demand of monetary reform into the mainstream media. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to get our understanding of monetary reform to such a point where we can communicate it throughout these different channels, throughout the Occupy network. So other things that helped make Occupy Wall Street a success. Our first big meeting was on August 2nd at Bowling Green. There was some images of me there. Sean Captain took these. They're in an article that he wrote, but that's not it. Let me go. I'll stay out of there. So from from Bowling Green, we decided to start meeting at Tompkins Square on a weekly basis before September 17th, which was the big launch day for Occupy Wall Street. And Tompkins Square Park, we didn't allow, this was like the one photo anyone has from it. There was no photography, much less live streaming involved. People were really worried about their security and their anonymity. There's still dozens of people showing up. Occupy Wall Street could have been even bigger than it was had these meetings been publicized on social media. So obviously that was then in 2011, this is now 2017. I'm trying to recreate that same idea of a weekly meeting with our people's genealogy of money discussions. I'm trying to get more people on a weekly basis talking about this stuff. And of course, the point is to talk about the basis of the lectures is Stephen Zarlenga's history of how money has been made throughout Western society, and using that wisdom from history to understand what's happening right now in the present with our current economic and monetary crisis in order to transform it, in order to create a green new society. So these weekly meetings were really important for building up a community, for building up not just a face-to-face community, but for building up an online community. The email discussion list was even more active than these meetings in the park. There were more people on the email lists outside of the city as well. And there were reporters on our email lists for Occupy Wall Street back then looking for news. There's tons of leaks constantly. And again, our meetings at the new school are in part to try to recreate this, as are our meetings out in front of the Fed every Friday. On August 31st, Anonymous entered the game. They started releasing the freaking coolest videos I've ever seen in my life. It blew a lot of people's minds. You couldn't tell if this was real or not. Anonymous has done some actions against the Fed. They had a little campaign called Project Icarus, Project Mayhem. They were trying to do some stuff with the Fed. I think they're DDoSing it. I made one new contact recently, a couple weeks ago, who has some more connections with Anonymous. He's not the first I've met, but I'm a big fan of Anonymous. I'm not a hacker. I'm good with sticks, knives, and books. I don't know squat about tech stuff. I'm glad Natalie's here helping me with it all, quite frankly. So if you're part of Anonymous, and everyone is, please help them understand the NEED Act and the need for monetary reform. They could get this done real quick for us. So the other thing that started blowing Occupy up, on the 1st of September, the Arts and Culture Committee, founded by Jeremy Bold, Alexander Carvalho, and a bunch of other people, several other students from the new school, in fact, they decided that they were going to go sleep out. I decided to go with them because I was like, wow, that's badass. I can't believe you guys are doing this. I didn't plan on sleeping out at all on September 17th, much less like a month or half a month before the entire thing was going to start. But these were other artists. These were fun people. These were cool people who they wanted to make something happen. They were committed. They were down to put it up on social media as well. And so it was a fun night for me. Like, I showed up pretty high and pretty drunk, and we just threw our blankets down in front of the George Washington statue right there on Federal Hall. My buddy pulled out his guitar, people were throwing frisbees, I pulled out a chessboard. I actually started teaching my buddy Jez how to do some capoeira. So that was kind of like the first 420 Fight Club, actually during Occupy Wall Street as well. I got high and practiced martial arts with a lot of people throughout Occupy Wall Street. 420 Fight Club's been going on since the beginning of Occupy. I just sort of gave it took me this long to give it a name though. So anyway, after we started having a good time, Jez starts this angry speech about the coming of the Second American Revolution. That's when the NYPD started getting in closer. Before that, there was lots of people who were just coming to us saying like, hey, what are you doing? I think we actually got some food and money donations like right away, just because it looked like we were having a good time and people supported what we were trying to do, which was just to shut down Wall Street. We didn't even have a demand anywhere near as intelligent as the NEED Act. But so what happened was that there were 12 of us. 9 of us were arrested. I wasn't, because I had to go to work the next day. 8 were released the same night pretty quickly after they arrested, but one guy didn't have an ID, so he stayed in for 24 hours and then went before a judge who threw the case out. But then the arrest became a top story on the Huffington Post, thanks in part to the HD video they shot of the incident. Recounting the arrest was the first item on the agenda at the next General Assembly meeting in Tompkins Square Park in the East Village. 9 had been released the next day with the summit. Something had finally happened. It wasn't just meetings and emails. There had been a demonstration, albeit tiny, and arrests. For the first time, it felt like September 17th might not be a total flop. And that's a quote from Sean Captain, the inside story of Occupy Wall Street, which you can find on Fast Company. It was October 7, 2011. And I wrote I wrote a little analytics report to people on our Google list about the growth I was seeing on OccupyWallStreet.org that the video of this clip was bringing to the website. And this little test run really helped make people think that something was going to happen. So what I've done ever since then, when launching a new movement like Occupy Weed Street or 420 Fight Club, or even if I'm going to take a break and then come back, it's very easy to start a movement by creating a Facebook event, saying that you're going to be there at that certain day, and then just doing something like a week or 2 weeks before, taking some photos of it, and then putting it up on that event link so that people know you're actually doing, so that people see that something's actually happening before they even go. People are much more likely to want to join in that way. It's not hard to get boots on the ground. So, some other stuff here with regards to the test run. So, the test run wasn't the only action that the Arts and Culture Committee was doing throughout the day down on in front of Federal Hall. It was the only one where they got arrested. They didn't want to get arrested. Getting arrested paid off big. It got a lot of attention towards Occupy Wall Street before it even happened. The video itself got dozens of thousands of views at the time it was put up. But they did other stuff. One other thing that the Arts and Culture Committee did was they had a picnic and they did yoga down on Wall Street, right in front of Federal Hall. And there was no loud, angry speeches. A cop came up to him, but the ANC people were just so goofy. I mean, one of them was wearing a panda suit, another guy had a Santa Claus hat on, he was yelling out, "Bail out bananas," and they were just doing yoga. There was no clear political motive. So when an NYPD officer came up, he was just like, "What are you guys doing?" They're just like, "Yo, we're just doing yoga," and he just walked away. He was so embarrassed, he didn't want to deal with them. And they finished the mission. They had a good time, they had a good picnic, they did a little outreach, talked to some other people. It didn't make the news, but that weekly pressure helped build momentum. It helped other people started showing up because they knew something was happening. And also, we got a sense, just sort of tactically, there's different ways to make a scene. You can use arrests to get a lot of media attention. Sometimes it might not get attention, sometimes it might, depending on if you have an audience for that. But this yoga picnic here, people didn't get arrested, but it was still easier for the community to engage with these people just having a picnic. So it's a trade-off. If you use arrests, you'll get more media attention. It might not be good media attention, but if you're going to go with the civil disobedience arrest strategy, your trade-off is that you don't get quite as much community involvement. You don't get quite as much time to actually talk to people and to potentially help them engage in the political process, be it through making a phone call, helping them make a phone call, or signing a letter, or even sending a tweet to their Congress reps for the NEED Act, which is what we actually want to be doing. So, important lessons there. So, I called this the riot porn hypothesis during Occupy Wall Street. Images of people getting abused by the police is essentially what riot porn is, be it photos or movies. And this chart, this graph here, this is a graph of visits to OccupyWallStreet.org, which Justino Tooney, the website that she put together for the movement, very controversial website, but a very effective and interesting site, in my opinion. So you can kind of see from my little cursor here, right here, September 2011, early in September, you can just barely see the lines start to thicken right at the beginning of the month when we did this test run. And then you see a little uptick on September 17th, a few people got arrested. There was some chaos, some stuff. But then the thing that really kicked us into mainstream media awareness was when that cop, Tony Baloney, who Jon Stewart made fun of famously, pepper sprayed some girls, and there was a lot of other police abuse that day. That got a lot of people paying attention to our movement. And then, we had like kind of a slow week there. There was, we got set up. Someone said that Radiohead was going to come through. They didn't show up. But then, about 700 people got arrested on the Brooklyn Bridge just after Radiohead didn't fall through. And again, like, just massive media frenzy over these arrests. October 15th, the first eviction defense. That was an example of riot porn without a lot of arrests. That was an example of how a lot of media people came. That was an example of how community involvement can still break media clutter. So things slowed down a bit then after October 15th. Slowed down for about a month. There's a lot of individual actions going on throughout Wall Street, throughout the rest of the city. But this is the time that, the NYPD backed off. They let us hold that space, and this is when they started sending, predators and dangerous people who need professional help down to the movement for free food. And then, without the community support, once the Occupy became too dangerous for the community to stay involved with it, that's when it was possible for the national-wide crackdown on the Occupy movement, not just at Zuccotti Park. But then, our N17 Day of Action had our Day of Revenge had, and our 2-month anniversary got some more traffic to the site. And then you can see there's little upticks here, anytime that there was like a big action, like January 2012, there was some barricades up in Zuccotti, and we turned them all into a jungle gym. That was pretty cool. There's different ways to get attention since then, but civil disobedience and arrests, the riot porn, that stuff does work. I didn't engage in it. I've never been arrested. I'm proud of never getting arrested. There are ways to still get your message across to the media without getting arrested and without having to throw your life into without having to inconvenience your life on such a massive basis. And I'm going to talk about how to use art and theater to get the mainstream media to pay attention to you rather than through direct civil disobedience and legal battles. That said, I'm at a very different place in my life now in 2017 than I was in 2011. And this is now my full-time occupation. I was trying to hold down a job, within advertising industry when I was doing all this work. That's why I was looking at it from an analytics level. And I didn't want to do civil disobedience because I had a job to go to. And my job allowed me to help support these other activists who were getting arrested and who were going out and doing the kind of work that I'm doing now. And so if you have a full-time job and you can't do what I'm doing, that's cool. I don't want you to give up your job. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep making your paper. If you can share some with me, that would be great. But if you can't, and if you happen to be, another disenfranchised person with some activist experience, perhaps some theater experience, some social media experience, some martial arts experience, there are ways for you to get a hustle going for yourself for monetary reform. And I'm happy to train other people who want to become full-time monetary reformers in terms of grassroots funding, especially if you're at another branch of the Federal Reserve somewhere in this country, or even a central bank somewhere else. If you can't afford to donate, the next best thing, actually starting some direct action or starting some direct education, it will help us all out way more in the long run. So, the riot porn hypothesis. If anyone is interested in helping me organize an effective civil disobedience action, please leave some comments below. Please reach out to me. I'd love to have a conversation about how we could potentially use civil disobedience to support the National Emergency Employment Act. We had a conversation about how potentially use civil disobedience to support a piece of cannabis legalization legislation called the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act. But after we spoke with an attorney and another guy, Angry Pacifist, who's done a lot of civil disobedience, we decided that it would have been too much pain for way too uncertain reward. I want to have the same conversation about using civil disobedience for monetary reform. So reach out, leave that in the comments if you can. Reason is because we know it works. Here's this is from a tool called People Browser I was using to look at Twitter analytics, and you can see the shape of Twitter volume with regards to Occupy Wall Street peaked at pretty much the same times as the site visits to OccupyWallStreet.org, which, so we're seeing civil disobedience. We're seeing that scene, that riot porn spectacle drive discussion about Occupy Wall Street during the early days. And the riot porn correlated with media exposure, especially for me. I had a lot of opportunities to speak on MSNBC and Fox, as well as a lot of other networks like RT, and even more radio programs than I could ever possibly remember. The big ones, of course, were with Fox, with Hannity. That was the biggest one. That was later on, even though that was more in 2012. So it's during closer to May Day, like our 1 year anniversary. So it's still possible to get media exposure without riot porn, but riot porn is like a direct sledgehammer to break through the media walls. So, let me just see if I have any other notes here. Yeah, I've done this lots of times. The thing is, though, is that I didn't know about the NEAT Act back then. Back when I was on these networks. I'm not showing you these headlines, when I was on Thomas Roberts and Tamron Hall and Fox and RT, because I want you to think, hey, look how cool this guy is. I want you to imagine where the world could potentially be now had I endorsed the National Emergency Employment Defense Act as the one demand that Occupy Wall Street should have about 5 years ago. There's little doubt in my mind that the economic recession would be well on its way to being over had I known about this back then when I was on these networks. That said, I'm trying to re-engineer what we did in 2011 so I can get back, so that I can get the message of monetary reform out there to the masses and to show other people that this is real. And indeed, to hopefully open the gate for people with more expertise on monetary reform to jump into the national conversation. We need to occupy the national conversation. And again, it's just a matter of re-engineering what we did back in 2011. The actions we did weren't huge. There's a little quote from the guy who taught me Kali, actually, talking about how unimpressed he was with what we did. It didn't look like much to him. It was just a ragtag group of people. But we changed the conversation. The protest on Wall Street was louder online than it was off. That was from Sean Captain and Fast Company. And that's what made it so effective. The fact that there were more people, what Occupy Wall Street shows us is that it doesn't take a lot of people on the ground doing grassroots activism in order to make something a lot bigger happen online within the media. We're not after some mass movement necessarily. We're after a change in the conversation like we did in 2011. And this graph here on the bottom, this is from HuffPo, really important graph that shows, it's from LexisNexis data, which shows that the number of news articles with the word inequality in it skyrocketed September of 2011. 99%, 1% was something else, was another graph that skyrocketed. So was greed. So our goal is to get monetary reform, the NEED Act. We want to see this same spike in number of news articles mentioning the NEED Act and monetary reform. And we can do that again. It takes some effort, but it doesn't take any effort that you don't have. If you have money, you can donate that. If you have time, you can donate that in a number of ways. You shouldn't have to push your boundaries very hard in order to push the banks and Congress into giving us our Green New Deal and our people's bailouts. So, who were these people changing the conversation? Who were these people paying attention to our little ragtag protests that we pulled off in Zuccotti Park and then all over other parks in the country? This is another Fast Company infographic that came from data that I collected off OccupyWallStreet.org. This infographic got me into a lot of trouble because it showed a profile of our Occupy Wall Street online audience that was very male, very white, very well educated, and this bothered a lot of minority organizers in the movement who were trying to do outreach to their communities. So this data, the way we collected it, we put a survey link up on OccupyWallStreet.org. Here's a little look at the link. And we just asked people to fill it out. This isn't representative data, but we got a lot of it. We got over 25,000 total clicks, 19,000 completed surveys total over 5 waves of data collection. So it's not necessarily representative of everyone in the country who was looking at us, but we got a lot of really useful stuff out of this. So the main themes of the survey were levels of support for it, the ways people participated in it, the demographics of people who were participating in it, the views those people had of politics and economics, the political behaviors in terms of voting as well, their use of mainstream and social media, their police reactions to the evictions, and race and community membership, participation in other movements. What they want to see us do next. They wanted us to see us do something next, and we didn't really come up with any demands. I found this out way too late. So the movement was very much a man's movement. It was online especially. Again, this doesn't, these data points here don't necessarily reflect the organizers of Occupy Wall Street. A lot of the organizers were from other countries or other cities entirely, but this reflects the people that those organizers appealed to and reached out to initially, especially with OccupyWallStreet.org. So you can see how definitely, like a 60 to 40, if not 70 to 30 male-female split pretty much throughout the movement, and the male population in 2010 was 48.4% of the country. So you can see how our number definitely shows men a little bit overrepresented in terms of online Occupy interest. I saw the same 60-40 split on Twitter with People Browser. Pretty much looked the same. And then it was in terms of the age of our online audience, it definitely sunk in with that 25-34 year age group. We're looking at as much as almost close to 40% in October when I first started collecting this data, and then down to about even 22%, still the dominant age group, even by the end of the survey. And compared to the national average, 25-34-year-olds make up about 17.2% of the national average. Sorry, just to rephrase this too, this data was also, I started this project, I collected the first wave of data, but then a researcher from Baruch, Hector Cordero Guzman, he helped me take the project over, helped me take it to the next level, helped me improve the surveys, and this data is available online through his website. You can reach out to him too, the University of Baruch. If you have more questions on this data, also please put them in the comments. So it was a young person's movement. It's interesting to see though how cumulative percentage of middle-aged people and seniors managed to increase as the movement went on. It was about 20% of the movement initially, wound up being about 44% combined towards the end. So Occupy did a better job. You can see how it got more and more mainstream for a little while as it moved on. So this is insights. This is a screenshot I just took today from our Occupy the Need Act Facebook page, which Will Decker has been keeping very active. And you can see again, we're predominantly male, 55, about 42 split, predominantly within that 25 to 34 year age range, with some 18, 24. Occupy the Need Act has a little bit, you're going to see it definitely has a bit broader appeal in terms of age demographics than something like 420 Fight Club. You can see this here. The male-female split is even more pronounced with this, on the analytics from our 420 Fight Club page. I just took this screenshot today. You can see how most of our 420 Fight Club fans are, they're white males predominantly, but predominantly men within that 18-24 year range, which is exactly who 420 Fight Club is meant to appeal to. That's exactly who I'm trying to reach with the project. It reaches obviously lots of other people as well, but I don't even think there was a single black character in Fight Club the movie initially. So trying to find all these other lost white children who don't feel like they have any particular heritage or place in the world, and introduce them into this tradition of monetary reform and martial arts. These conversations here at the New School around the people's genealogy money are intended to be more open, broader based in terms of age and gender participation. So something else we can see here, that Occupy our online audience was incredibly well educated. A lot of them had college education, definitely even in twice, not twice as much, but almost 10 percentage points more likely than the national population to have a college degree. Even more, our Occupy respondents were even more likely to have graduate school education than the national average. So you can start to see a picture of what's going on here. A lot of men, really educated, young men, not necessarily currently in school. Our online audience was pretty much out of school. Were they employed? Yes, for the most part. A little less than the national average of 56.5 employment back in 2010. You can see how there's still a lot of part-time and unemployed people paying attention to Occupy Wall Street. Definitely more than the national average, almost twice as much in some cases. So again, you can see this. You've got a lot of white, really well-educated white males who aren't making their money. Most of these people were making less than $25,000 a year. A little bit higher than the national average. And these broke, white, well-educated men with these high expectations who weren't making a lot of money, they're predominantly single, never married. Much higher representation compared to the national average. 53.9% compared to 29.2% from our first wave of data. So you can sort of see this picture. You can sort of see the Freudian discontent of interest in Occupy Wall Street that we had tapped into. 420 Fight Club is very much an attempt to tap into a lot of that interest and direct it towards monetary reform. So again, you see predominantly a lot of people, most of our online audience didn't have kids. Not only were they not married, they didn't have kids. Most of them didn't live with children, between 70 and 80% of them across all waves of respondents. Definitely more of an urban movement, more people living in cities paying attention to us compared to rural areas. And there was a lot of global traffic. The traffic wasn't just coming from the United States. We were getting a lot from other English-speaking countries like Canada, UK, but then from a lot of other countries as well. Hundreds of thousands, not dozens, thousands of visits. But again, you could see how most of the traffic was coming from major cities along the East and West Coast and the big cities in the Midwest. Hector actually how we could find y'all houses with this tech. If you really wanted to, you could like find your IP address and stuff, but you know, I'm not into that like the NSA is. So the other thing here is that our audience didn't tend to identify as Democrat or Republican. Very much an independently minded audience, according to how they responded. These people, we asked them who they blamed for the problems, and most of them blamed the banks. Bush administration, mortgage lenders, and corporations all came in as well. You see some blame for the Federal Reserve right down here in the middle, but this should be a lot higher. More people should understand the role of the Federal Reserve with regards to the economic crisis. More people need to understand the role that the Federal Reserve has to large banks and financial institutions. And you can see how there's less and less blame for like the Clinton, the Obama administrations or the Democratic Senates among our base, our online base.
So what did the Federal Reserve, shouldn't the Federal Reserve be categorized under large banks and financial institutions?
No, because it's definitely, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency. It's not owned by the government. Mm-hmm. The shareholders, it's definitely separate from the commercial banks. The Federal Reserve itself isn't a commercial bank. Mm-hmm. The commercial banks can't function without the Federal Reserve.
But the Federal Reserve is the umbrella over those banks, right?
It's one way to look at it,
when people are blaming the banks, but really they should be blaming the Federal Reserve above the banks. Is that true? Or?
Yeah, that would be a step in the right direction. Remember, the banks make the money up out of nothing. The banks are the ones that give the money out to arms manufacturers and gentrifiers and prisons and stuff like that. But the Federal Reserve is what backs them up. So if you want to take out the banks, you take out their backup plan, and then you can attack all the banks at once by going after the Fed. It's not necessarily that the banks are under the Fed or subject to oversight from the Fed necessarily. It's just that the Fed makes their money for them.
So pretty much most people know what the problem is, that it's the banks, but
they don't know what the Federal Reserve has to do with the banks. They don't know what the Federal Reserve has to do with the government. They don't know what it should have to do with the government. So, yeah, we were close back in 2011, but we didn't take it far enough. We had more to talk about. And, if we were to ask this question again now, I don't even know. I think police brutality, a lot of this, I think, the attention we managed to put on banks started to get focused more and more on police brutality within Occupy Wall Street, especially as we move forward after the eviction. And, a lot of it culminated into Black Lives Matter, which, of course, is a very necessary movement. But again, the Federal Reserve has everything to do with the oppression of black people. The Federal Reserve is profiting off the oppression of black lives in this country, and so there needs to be more awareness of, how the Federal Reserve funds governments that funds police departments to go out and do these things, and these police departments seize assets and houses and stuff like that in order to pay off their budgets or whatever, and eventually pay off the banks. So I have more to learn, obviously, about all this as well. That's why we need more Black Lives Matter activists to get involved with monetary reform. So participation. You can see that participation, people didn't tend to agree that they participated very much when Occupy started in September and October. But that nearly doubled by December. We got more people to say that they were participating as we moved along. We asked people how they participated. Facebook activism. Hi, everybody. That was the number one thing that people would do. After that, attending protests, doing internet activism, like Twitter activism, or maybe writing a letter or something. Then recruiting friends, just having that conversation with your friends, getting them to come down with you and check it out. Donating money came after all that stuff. If people who couldn't afford to go down there, take photos, tweet out photos and whatever not, those people, if you're stuck in a full-time job, those are the people who are most likely to donate money. If you can donate money to me, please do. You can do it at GoFundMe. You can fund a People's Genealogy of Money or 420 Fight Club. Every little bit helps, even if it's only a token donation to show that you support this. If you don't have any money, please at least talk about this. Share this with other people who do have money. If you know people who brag about donating to like MoveOn.org or Greenpeace or any number of organizations competing for your cash, I strongly encourage you to donate to me, because none of them are fighting for monetary reform. None of them are fighting for your right to free money, into a Green New Deal, into a people's bailout. And I hope that this track record I'm trying to show with you will help convince you that donating money to this monetary reform movement is a safe bet. So as I was saying before, talk about riot porn, the riot porn hypothesis, and how you can make riot porn with arrests. That's just one way to make the striking kind of dark, violent images that the media want to see. Like once you look the right way for the media, you can say whatever you want and you can get your message through. I like to bait the media. And so I've never been arrested. I don't like being abused and handcuffed or restrained or anything like that. PTSD issues. But I like theater. So I try to recreate what Anonymous does with their videos, just in front of the Fed, real people, real life, using what I know. And I believe in using art as direct action, just like with the yoga picnic when my friends just went out to do yoga in order to make a scene with just a little bit of movement art. I decided to use martial arts for the same purpose. And obviously, martial arts can look pretty scary to the media sometimes. At first, we were doing this with capoeira, which was a martial art developed by slaves in Brazil, far and away the most effective martial art for fighting slavery. And I got into Kali about a year ago because it's a little bit easier to get people into it. It's a little bit more beginner-friendly, and it's a weapons-based art with sticks and knives. We don't use any real blades. But trying to use martial arts to create a spectacle, to get people interested in what we're doing, to get people to come to us, to ask us questions, rather than us having to shout and yell and throw this at people. The strategy is just to create an implosion. It's to have a good time so that people start coming to us. Again, I'd love to have a conversation about how to use civil disobedience to speed this up, but eventually more and more people will come to our weekly meetings here at the New School and in front of the Fed and eventually some of those people will be reporters, and hopefully after that we'll start getting local and even national politicians, ideally. So other ways to stage a scene without violence and arrests is to use canvassing, to use education, as well as art as direct action. We could talk a lot more about the mechanics of canvassing. Will Decker, he did a great job of doing this out in Norman, Oklahoma, out in the middle of nowhere for the NEAT Act. And if he can do it out in the middle of Oklahoma, y'all can do it anywhere. So again, I like using martial arts in order to stop people, but a good sign and a good pitch and a good call to action, hey, call your Congress rep, tell them about this bill, take some photos of you getting that call, put that on social media. You will have an audience for it already because there's people here in New York paying attention to what you're doing. So again, there's other ways to start to do outreach and to build buzz without getting arrested. In terms of, this is an interesting action I was involved in. And what we did, we tried to shut down an intersection on Madison Avenue close to a protest at Bryant Park, I believe. Yeah, we were at 48th and Madison. And so what we did, we had a bed and, we had a puppet with a Barack Obama face chained to a money bag with the Goldman Sachs logo on it. And we dumped this bed off into the middle of the street. We had this U-Haul, we had gloves on so no one would have our fingerprints and shit. Totally illegal action. But we just dropped this bed off in the middle of the street to try to stop traffic. And we had photographers and video people, who didn't look like they were part of us filming this after those of us who dropped this bed just split. And the action got quite a bit of interest, but the takeaway, there's about nearly 447 Facebook users who saw photos of this on a Facebook page that we were using, but the video thing, the video clip that we made of this and put on YouTube didn't quite do as well. So the moral of the story is that just taking photos and getting those out to your community on Facebook can be a little bit more effective than creating a YouTube clip, unless you know what you're doing, unless you have some video editing skills. Just creating the importance of an interesting photo, of a colorful photo that makes people more interested in what you're doing is vital to getting a community monetary reform meeting happening. Almost done here. So obviously teach-ins are another great way to generate buzz without getting arrested. We had our first public discussion here at the New School last Thursday. I already wrote to the sociology department again, telling them that we wanted to continue our conversation. I'm waiting to hear back to see if we can meet this week or next week if it's too short notice. But I'm hoping to get weekly space here at the New School for us to have conversations about lectures that I do on Monday night, so we could talk about how, history informs the present. But I also want our teachings to turn into a working group session where we actually start using social media or letters or phone calls to actually contact people in Congress and demand their support for our bill. So these methods of using art and education as direct action also will get you media exposure. It may take a little bit longer than getting arrested will in some cases, but we've still been able to make headlines even since the buzz from Occupy Wall Street died down. There's a recent one in The Guardian. I can usually get a headline by going to the anniversary of Occupy Wall Street at Zuccotti, which is where I went last year, 2016. We had a really good mention for the NEAT Act in an American Banker article by crashing a book release party for Ben Bernanke at the Barnes and Nobles in Union Square. So we got a really good article about 425 Club from Serena Dye, also in 2014. The ways in which you're going to get headlines when you first start out is typically by going to other people's actions where you know there's going to be reporters there. So once you start going, once you have your weekly action going, the way to get more exposure to that is to go start doing some outreach to other places, some canvassing where there are going to be reporters already. We met Serena Dye at our local community board meeting where we were trying to gain some support for the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act. We crashed this book release party at Barnes and Nobles, and that's where Jacob Passy started interviewing me after I gave out a loud speech about the NEAT Act. Same thing at The Guardian. I was in the Guardian article at the 5-year anniversary of Occupy. I was invited to speak there. You can get media attention just by being controversial. You don't need to get arrested. One of my favorite articles ever was Occupy Wall Street organizer Harrison Schultz offers himself up on Rent-A-Gent. That was in BuzzFeed. Vanity Fair did an article from that called We Hired a Male Escort and All We Got Was a Lousy Lecture on Dismantling Capitalism. I didn't make much money as a male escort for Rent-A-Gent at all. I like doing this more. This is much more honest labor as far as I'm concerned. And again, please fund it. I don't want to have to go back to Rent-A-Gent. I don't want to have to go back to the advertising industry doing work for ExxonMobil or like Lunesta or any crap like that. This is important. I believe in this work. I don't know of any other organization out there doing work like this in this country. Positive Money UK is obviously a great organization for monetary reform and sovereign currency, but they're in the UK. They've got their hands full in Europe. Everybody here, including myself, would like to see a really slick, positive media style movement with some really good social media memes and stuff like that, but it ain't going to happen anytime soon. These grassroots tactics and strategies are our best bet to make this revolution happen sooner rather than later. And if you can afford to support me so that I can keep doing this, please do. If you can't afford to support me with money, that's cool. Help out, get involved. Come to 425 Club to learn some martial arts and have a good time. Show up to our lectures at the New School. Even better yet, if you're at a university somewhere else, start your own discussion on monetary reform there. We can get you a syllabus. If you have experience lecturing, we can help you teach your own class on monetary reform, which we'll watch and support from our end, and that will only help. Occupy wouldn't have worked without multiple occupations all over the place. The other point to make too about media and theater and art and education is that our goal, and this comes from a book called Poor People's Movements, our goal is to change the conversation more so than to create like a new mass membership-based organization. My critique of not just the public banking people, the modern money people, but also the American Monetary Institute, our friends, and also even Positive Money, the same critique is the same critique that Francis Fox Piven and Richard Clower have of unions in general. Looking at multiple poor people's movements throughout U.S. history, the radicalism of the 30s, the civil rights movements, and beyond, they found that big organizations like unions typically tended to hamper change for poor people. They found that disruptions typically are what caused the most instability for media, for politicians, And that's usually what gets concessions for poor people. Disruption more so than organization. The trick of our movement, the trick of getting the mainstream media to pay attention to us is to organize disruptions out in the streets that get people talking online. And again, we don't necessarily have to get arrested to do that. So, just to start concluding, practical steps in terms of how to make the media pay attention to our monetary revolution is to identify your specific audience. I use 420 Fight Club to go after young people who have never heard of monetary reform. We use cannabis and martial arts in order to, as a gateway drug, literally, to get people into monetary reform and the NEED Act. Why are you out here getting high and doing martial arts in front of the Fed? Oh, for this bill? Oh, that sounds cool. Okay. Make them ask the questions. Start organizing short, consistent weekly actions. That'll help create your public discussion on Facebook and Twitter. Then you actually want to do something. Do something before the actual date of your action, just to get those photos, just to show people that it's going to be real, and you'll get more boots on the ground. The key is to have fun. When you're out there, do some yoga, do some martial arts, do something to make people pay attention to you. After that, it's just a matter of having a flyer or a call to action, asking people to contact their reps or to come to your meeting or to whatever it is that you're doing. After that, it's very important to take photos of your action, be it art, be it education. Video clips help too if you have editing experience. But you want to show people engaging with your movement. You want to show as many different diverse people as possible in order for other people to identify with your movement. And then live streaming, like we're doing now with Facebook Live, that becomes more important. That'll help get more. Once you're having a good time, the live stream will make people want to come to you. Eventually, people will spend so much time watching you on live stream that they wish they were just there, and they'll be like, damn, I may as well just be there. Live stream is also critical when you're dealing with police. Anytime police come, you need to have that live stream on in order to protect yourself. And you don't need to get arrested when the police come, and if you back down, that's fine. Like, that'll get you just as much attention as getting arrested in many cases. It might not get you media attention, but it'll get you community support. So after that, once you get your action, at your location, at your university or your central bank, after that, you can speed things up by intercepting the media wherever you can find them. You go on Facebook, look at other grassroots community actions going on close to your neighborhood, and you'll probably find media there. You can always go to community board meetings. There's usually local reporters there who are like really bored with nothing better to do. If you go in there with a little bit of theatrics, which I get from like Abby Hoffman, try to spice it up a little bit, get a little theatrical, you'll probably find some really bored local reporters who will be happy to pick you up. And then you'll find more reporters who will write secondary news stories off that. We're going to go looking for reporters soon. We're going to go next week. There's the annual cannabis parade in New York City. It's right here in Union Square. We're going to go there, and we're going to bring our weapons and our weed. We're going to have a good time. We're going to have some flyers. Hopefully we'll find some new media to help cover our growing monetary revolution. So other digital resources, you can promote the greensformonetaryreform.org website, which you can use as a syllabus for any monetary teach-ins. Create your own Facebook fan pages for your photos. Create your own Twitter handles for your own area. You can follow ours, of course, as well, Occupy the NEED Act and at 420 Fight Club NYC. You're going to want to get a good email discussion list or a Google group. Our friend Will Decker is doing a really good job of this right now. He's keeping the conversation going on the email really well. And we want to add to that too. So with that, thanks for listening. Please donate to my work. been doing this for a long time. I don't want to do it forever. I want to get the job done. I want all of us to get paid off this movement. But also, if you can't afford to donate, please give me feedback on this presentation. Please tell me how to make this presentation better. If you have any questions about anything, about how to start your own movement, about how to get involved, about how to apply your specific skill sets to a monetary reform revolution, please hit me up. Is there any questions or comments there? All right, I guess everyone's already on board. They know how to do this. So that's all I got for tonight. Thanks for listening.